It's a great pleasure and honor to be with you this year. Last year, we spoke about value migration and the way in which industries change. What I'd like to do this year is to focus on something a little bit more specific, and it is competing through digitally designed ecosystems. And just to motivate that, for a number of us, the much lamented and prematurely gone device that was our gateway to the world as we were traveling through has given way not to just another device, but to a group of firms that collaborate with it. And the CEO of the other company that was eclipsed by this change, Nokia, just as the ship was going down, sent this email to his employees saying that the battle of devices has now become a war of ecosystems, where ecosystems include not only the hardware and software, but developers, applications, e-commerce, advertising, and that this means that we're going to have to decide how to either build, catalyze, or join an ecosystem. And unfortunately for Nokia, it was too late. Now, ecosystems are important, and I'll show you in a little while a bit of the recent research that tries to measure and contextualize that. But what is an ecosystem? Well, if you go back to the people who are speaking about that, ecosystem has been used as a metaphor, as something that helps us think about everyone that we can connect to. And in one of the first papers in HBR that looks at it, Marco Ianciti and Richard Levian eventually say, well, you know what? Drawing the boundaries of this ecosystem is impossible, and at any rate, academic exercise. Well, a couple of things. The first thing, I am an academic. Second, 2004 is not 2018. And what we have seen is the emergence of well-delineated, orchestrated, strategically managed group of firms that organize together in order to compete. So just the metaphor, however rich and evocative it is, may be misleading. What did we do? Well, part of it is research, and I promise this is the only part of an academic article that I'm going to be putting on screen. It's a paper that was just published on the theory of ecosystems in the Strategic Management Journal, and we looked around and we said with my co-authors, well, how are ecosystems different? What do they boil down to? Well, tell you what, in the old world, but you'd had things that needed to work together, well, you could do a couple of different things. You either produced all of them and you gave them to the final consumer, or alternatively, what you could have is a system integrator, the IBM of yesteryear, that would take all kinds of bits and pieces, or EDS or Accenture, and say, here, there you have it. It's a solution that is ready from all kinds of components. Or alternatively, the customer would say, well, I'm going to put all the pieces together myself. I'm a grown-up person or firm. I'm able to do that. Well, the challenge, though, is that that doesn't quite work this way with ecosystems that create this perimeter. And in this perimeter, you have a number of different components. So think about the apps that you have in your phone. It's not infinite variety. It's variety that you can actually go and choose. So there's this interesting paradox. Apple and Google don't tell you what you're going to buy, but they tell you how you're going to be circumscribing the bag from which you're actually choosing stuff. And whatever consulting gig you see, you will see that people say, industries are dead, ecosystems will become important. And that's one of the recent McKinsey things that we saw. Now, why is this happening? Well, this is happening because things like the picture that I have behind, which is the guild hall, which is the way that we organize societies in guilds, in things that had exclusionary principles, are just dissolving. And you'll hear from this panel the challenge of people who compete in a world where the industry boundaries are going down. And what you see instead, you don't have architects and doctors and lawyers, but you have people who can support the needs coming from different ways. What does that mean? It means that the patient does not go for a doctor, but to some combination of AI and multiple services that all come together with them. Now, if this is the case, you see why companies are starting to create these digitally enabled connections. Consider what Nest is doing. Nest is not only a venture that measures the temperature in your home and regulates how much you spend, but it also connects with cameras, it connects with the jawbone that you can have, and it can increase the temperature when it senses that you wake up. It creates these links, these ecosystems, these structured set of firms. And these ecosystems come together when they are designed and when the links are specific. Let me give you an example. I told you that ecosystems are about making things that work together. Well, you can think about that as tea leaves, a bag, hot water. That needs to work together. Now, we're not going to be speaking about a tea ecosystem. We're not. But think about what Nespresso did, which is to design a specific link to the way that it packages coffee with the people that interface with it. And now it can start saying, do I want to have the machines produce myself? Or do I want to have an open set of relationships where I give some parameters and I say, you guys come and complement me. And that is the element of design that distinguishes much of what we see happening today. Started working with BCG, and we've done research that looks at who uses ecosystems. First of all, this is a graph of all the large companies, over 10 billion, and says how many of them report the term ecosystem. It's been growing. What's more important, the annualized revenue growth of the companies that use ecosystem is markedly different. Now, perhaps you could say, fine, but this is not causation, it's just association. Perhaps. It does show us, though, that there's something there. Now, looking at it, we found a few things, and let me just summarize them. First, we saw that in ecosystems, there are distinct roles. Not only orchestrators, but also partners and contributors who have distinct parts in organizing the way that things are put together. Second, not everyone should try to be build an ecosystem. Not everyone should try to be an orchestrator, and that is one of the most common mistakes of companies who have this fantasy that they will become the Google of their own world. And it's interesting that when you see companies that are responding, companies here that are responding to the threat of Uber, like BMW and Daimler, Mercedes-Benz, rather than trying to create their own luxury mobility ecosystem, they are now joining forces because they realize that in order to reverse the trend, and in order to defend themselves from a vision of the future that is not friendly to them, they need to reorganize things altogether. What do you need to do? Well, your strategy will involve multiple designed ecosystems with multiple roles. One company is going to have a number of different ecosystems with different roles, and we also see companies that are strategically using connections between their ecosystems to create a new generation of synergies, like the ones that we see in Ping An, which using this strategy became the most valuable insurance in the world. A few companies are trying to become mega system integrator, and that is changing the environment for most of us in the room. It doesn't mean that we need to emulate them. It means that we need to think about the strategy for building our own ecosystems or competing in ecosystems. And finally, perhaps the biggest problem that I've seen working with companies that are developing their own ecosystems is that they get a word wrong, because they try to think about their ecosystems. They live in the time before Copernicus, when all the stars are going around them. And rather than thinking about the needs of the clients, developing some true value, and the needs of the complementers, they are simply creating a map around themselves. Doesn't work. What's the agenda? Create a strategy, identify a customer need, understand your complementer need, but also change the organization. Think about the challenges that we've seen working with BCG in a company like Volkswagen that needs to shift from running a simple alliance that it had for 25 years to 40 interdependent links that it has as it tries to shape the future. And the final thing, and it's a slide from the World Economic Forum, where I have the privilege of being the academic coordinator of one of the new task forces in digital platforms and ecosystems, where we're trying to have a discussion on what that means for society. Because unfortunately, these ecosystems transcend national boundaries, and they have created also a world which is much more uneven. Exciting, even if uneven, with challenges on how we run organizations. I couldn't think of a better topic for a meeting such as this. Thank you.